Welcome to the Symbolic Lodge of Conversation, where consciousness and curiosity interweave into discussion. This is All Square Podcast. I'm your host, R.L. Franks, and today's guest has been in the esoteric circles for over 20 years, and his journey into Freemasonry may be a little unorthodox than some of our previous guests. He's from the great state of Indiana, and he's my brother, Rodney McGillvary. Rodney, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Robbie. It's a pleasure being here.
My brother, you traveled all this way to come. We have a lot of information that we're going to be going over today. I want to know, Rodney the man, and how did you start your journey into what led you to Freemasonry?
Well, it started out, I was part of an organization called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And how I came about joining the Golden Dawn was through a good friend of mine at the time. We were both in the punk scene in Fort Wayne, Indiana. He's been in the Golden Dawn for years prior to me meeting him. And throughout various conversations, among various amounts of drinking and having a great time, he led me to find it favorable to pursue my spiritual path.
So some people might not know what the Golden Dawn is. Can you please tell the audience what is the Golden Dawn? Because it's not Masonic, but there has been Masons who are a part of it. It's like its own esoteric order, correct?
Correct. Well, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn started in England in the late 1800s by 3 members of Freemasonry. They were also 3 members of the SRIA, the Societas Rosicrucian Anglia, over there in England. The 3 members were McGregor Mathers, William Westcott, and Robert Woodman. They also delved in Hermetic philosophy as well as alchemy. And they wanted a society that they weren't really getting from Freemasonry. They wanted something more spiritual. And they also wanted to include women in their group.
Okay. This is an organization I've heard of in the past by some of the literature I've read, but how does a guy like you, you're a young man, how did you find your way into this? Did you have family members that were a part of it? You said the music scene, which is always kind of interesting that music plays a role with some of the mysticism and esoterics and how that harmony and balance brings us all together with music. So you're meeting these people while you're in a punk band, correct?
Yep, I was in a punk band back in the day. And I kept seeing this guy coming to my shows, and I had this T-shirt on I'd wear every now and then of a really good goth rock band at the time called Christian Death. And he saw my shirt and he was surprised that somebody in small town Indiana was wearing a Christian Death T-shirt. So he approached me and we had some really fruitful discussions about esoteric philosophy as well as underground music.
When you were learning this Golden Dawn, did you know about it beforehand? Have you always been into this kind of study and work? I mean, how many years are we talking that you have experience in this one esoteric order?
Within that order, probably going on 17 years actually being in the order. I dabbled in like certain meditations that were attributed to that order. Years prior to that, I've read books like by Madame Blavatsky, Aleister Crowley, Manly P. Hall. Like my first book I ever purchased as a teenager was The Secrets of All the Ages by Manly P. Hall. That was one of the most fascinating books I've ever read. And then next to that book at Barnes & Noble was The Big Black Brick called The Golden Dawn by Israel Regardie. And it was all of the old initiation rituals of the Golden Dawn.
Young man reading about all the symbolism, alchemy. What else are you kind of gathering from your studies in this?
Well, also, it started me on the path of the hero's journey.
Hero's journey, what do you mean?
The being born, being initiated, conquering certain things in your life, and then coming out, finding your true self.
Where does this school of thought come from?
You can see it stemming all the way back from Egypt. You got the cult of Osiris, where Osiris was slain by the Egyptian god Set. And then Osiris's son Horus went on the hero's journey to defend his father.
You're talking about old Egyptian mythology. You're very deep. You're the iceberg of esoteric knowledge. So we have a lot of Masons, non-Masons, maybe other people of different mystery schools who are tuning into this. So forgive me for all my questions, but I just want to make sure we're breaking it down, because this is some very steep knowledge you're talking about. So you're talking about Egyptian mythology.
Yep. And that's also where alchemy comes from.
Alchemy. So alchemy correlates to the Golden Dawn?
Well, once I was in the Golden Dawn, I learned the whole concept of alchemy. I've heard of it in the past. Like, most people hear of alchemy as being transmuting a base metal into a more spiritual metal, or lead to gold. Come to find out, it's also a spiritual journey where you are lead and you can become gold.
Go more in detail on that. What do you mean? You're talking about a spiritual transformation?
Spiritual transmutations, like what I like to call it, where you have your mundane self that's comprised of all the influences of life, be it your upbringing with your parents, the school system, all the media that you see on the TV, the music you listen to, all your friends, everyone you're around builds up this personality that I like to call your fake self, or your mundane self. And throughout the spiritual journey, you can eliminate I like to call the draws of oneself, to find that prima materia, or that inner materia that everything is consisted of, the primal source, which is connected to source, which is your true self.
How old were you when you were starting to learn all these different words and terminologies in the Golden Dawn? Did you actually join the Golden Dawn, or is this just all just from reading and then you're just piecing things together?
I've heard of these terms prior to the Golden Dawn, but none of it made any sense really to me. It was all surface level, and I started digging deeper probably about when I was 25 years old, and that was the same time my daughter was being born.
Wow. Yeah. Talk about a transformation in of that self too, creating life. You said this was your first daughter?
Correct.
Okay. How many kids do you have?
I have two teenage daughters. My oldest just turned 16, and my younger daughter will turn 15 in February.
And now I have to ask the other important question. What does your wife think about all this? I mean, all this vast knowledge.
Well, to fast forward a little bit, my wife actually, once I dropped out of the Golden Dawn, because I was still a member of the Golden Dawn officially when I met my wife, and I dropped out shortly afterwards, and she was a primary attribute to me joining Freemasonry. She pushed me toward that route.
That's really great to have a support system on that journey. I mean, it sounds like you found your soulmate in that aspect, because there's a lot of people in these different realms of thoughts and philosophies and mystery schools where modern couples, some are probably into it or exposed to the paranormal, supernatural, and these other esoteric arts. We keep using that as the focal point today. But some people get a little spooked from it because of what they've been told, or to stay away from and all that. But here, you're a young man, you're embracing it, you meet somebody, she's supporting you on this journey. I'm going to put a pin into why you said you left the Golden Dawn, because we still don't even know how that journey
Correct.
came to be. So I just want to make sure I understand what you just said. You were not a Mason before you were in Golden Dawn. You started this whole other journey into the Golden Dawn, and you're meeting all these people. Because I got to say, I'm from Northwest Ohio, and I've traveled vast and far in other states I haven't heard of like Golden Dawn organizations in the area.
Well, let me say this. At the time, I knew what Freemasonry was, well, at least what I thought it was. I didn't have a good view of Freemasonry when I was in the Golden Dawn, at least starting out.
Why?
I thought it was like an old man's club. I thought it seemed very boring. I didn't see any spiritual side to it. Um, I noticed the conspiracies at the time when I was younger. I delved into the conspiracy theories. Um, Potentially, maybe I thought they were running the world at the time and led to a lot of negative energy going on in the planet. Um, and then my mindset on Freemasonry changed when I met a fellow member of the Golden Dawn who was from Haiti, and he was a Freemason from Haiti. He was living in Fort Wayne for about 25 years. He married a missionary when he was in Haiti, and she moved him over to Fort Wayne. He told me in Haiti, Freemasonry is magical.
How so?
There's a lot of voodoo and various things over in Haiti that actually are influenced by Freemasonry and vice versa.
Interesting. I would love to dive into that more. Are you still in contact with this brother?
Oh yeah, he's still one of my best friends. Actually, he invited me to a Haitian New Year's party. So I was over there hanging out with him. Aside from him, I was the only other English speaking person. I was the only white guy there, and it was amazing.
Well, maybe you'll have to put us in contact, and maybe we'll have an opportunity to talk to him and hear what masonry is like on the on another side of the
Oh,
world.
it's a whole different thing. They take it really seriously over there. For example, real quick, his brother died. He was a little bit older than him. He's in his 40s. His brother's probably in his 50s at the time. A few years ago, his brother passed away. His brother was a spiritual guru over there in Haiti. When his brother passed away, he flew over there to reside over his funeral, but all the Masons there lined up for a funeral procession and marched along the streets carrying his casket through the streets, and it was a huge, huge event.
When you are talking about this Haitian ritual, I'm thinking Prince Hall Freemasonry, which is typically an African American style Freemasonry, African style Freemasonry. Is that Prince Hall style Masonry?
Not at all.
No? Okay.
Because it's not called Prince Hall Masonry. It's called traditional Masonry over there. Like everything else, they're tied to the Grand Lodge of France.
Well, there's several Grand Lodges of France, and some are clandestine and some are not. So I don't know if you have that information of which one it's a part of.
I'm not sure that exactly. He didn't go into too much extreme detail about that specifically, but there are certain hand gestures and words in masonry that can be used for a magical formula over there in Haiti.
Really? Well, you'll have to put us in contact, and we'll have to discuss, his journey as well at another time. You're all about alchemy, and I want to get into that, but I want to hear, how did you knock on the door to the Golden Dawn, and what was that experience like walking through? Is it a lodge? Is it a temple? Is it, what is it considered in Golden Dawn?
It's considered a temple, and so I put my petition in through my friend that I mentioned that introduced me to what the Golden Dawn was. There was a temple up in Joliet, Illinois, close to Chicago. The Temple of Ptah is what it was called. Each temple of the Golden Dawn is in reference to a specific Egyptian god, and the one up there was Ptah. So I go up there for my initiation as a neophyte. The grade structure of the Golden Dawn was the same grade structure of the SRIA over in England.
Which is what?
It's the Rosicrucian aspects of Freemasonry. See, one thing about the Golden Dawn is you go through similar paths that the SRIA offers, but then when you get to the inner orb of the Golden Dawn, it's strictly Rosicrucian, and that's where that comes in full fold. So I end up at Temple of Ptah in Joliet, Illinois. I get dressed in specific regalia. I sit in the antechamber and meditate while they're setting up the temple. I go in blindfolded. I don't know what to expect. A lot of anxiety going on. As during a certain part of the initiation, once I'm into the temple, they release the blindfold and I see light for the first time. I'm like a child in darkness, wandering for light, and then I finally see the light.
Without giving away the rituals, what's that experience like? Like, how many people did you know in that place? It's, again, joining, as I say often on the podcast, I wouldn't consider them as strangers, but you don't have the relationships with these people, but you're all brought together by one common thread. And I guess what's the common thread in the Golden Dawn?
Spiritual growth. Becoming, their main thing is called becoming more human than human, which is kind of a Nietzschean philosophy with the concept of the Übermensch.
Can you elaborate on that?
Where we could rise above this mundane physical existence into a more spiritual, more fruitful lifestyle.
Okay. How many grades or degrees or rituals are in the Golden Dawn?
Well, you got neophyte through...
And neophyte means?
Initiate, beginner.
Okay.
It's the beginning path. It's like the entered apprentice, so to speak. So then you got that through the portal. So you got like the portal is the 5th degree of the Golden Dawn, and then you go into the inner order after that. And then there's a couple of degrees after that. The final degree, you have to actually not be in your physical body to obtain.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to ask on a little bit more, if you can, a little bit more of an explanation on that. I think people at home are going to want to know what that means.
And let me also add that the degree system also goes along with the Kabbalistic tree of life system. So there's 10 spheres or Sephiroth in the tree of life that correlate to the degrees of the Golden Dawn. So the earth, or 10th Sephiroth on the tree of life, Malkut, is represented by the neophyte.
Are you wearing an amulet that is a representation of the tree of life? Is that what I see over there?
Correct. This is the tree of life. I don't know if you could see it there at home, but
you can find diagrams also.
There's 10
online.
spheres and 22 paths connecting it, representing 33 paths altogether, which kind of correlates to the 32 paths of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. And when you go beyond the 10th path, beyond the Godhead, you reach that sublime degree of the 33rd.
This organization, what would you call it? A mystery school, I guess?
Yes. And the Golden Dawn is officially considered a mystery school, and a Western mystery school, because it does have some Eastern traditions involved with Western traditions as well.
Is there any everyday practices that people can apply with this organization in their daily life? You said meditation earlier. Mm-hmm. Are there other avenues that you can use as working tools to be working on yourself? Kind of taking a play on words of, what Freemasons utilize their working tools to build their spiritual edifice. Are there like daily routines that you practice? Prayer? I see this. Answer that question. I have another follow-up question for you.
Yeah, there's prayers, there's invocation, there's ritual. All those terms can be used in a similar manner. So to speak, like we have a thing or ritual that can be used daily called the LBRP, or the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, which can be used in the morning to clear off any negative energy from your dream state. And you can use it in the evening as well. Let's say you come home from work, you had a bad day, build up a lot of negative energy with your fellow coworkers. You could use that LBRP when you get home to kind of wash yourself from those negative energies.
Now, you said the theme is Egyptian, and each one of the temples is a different Egyptian god. They're named after an Egyptian god, correct? Right after he's done lighting a cigar. But I think it's quite fascinating that you said 3 Masons really who were very active. McGregor, Mathers. Who were the other two?
William Westcott and Robert Woodman.
Okay. Masonry's all male, an all male fraternity, and they want to join and make a co-ed organization that's again not connected to Masonry.
Right. No, there was a few women like Florence Farr, Dion Fortune, that really attributed to the fraternity. I guess they wanted to incorporate the feminine aspect, even like physically, having women come in and have those feminine energies as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's some different thoughts and perspectives that can play into that mystery school. I guess the question I wanted to get to was each of these temples are named after a different Egyptian god. So is it monotheistic? Is it polytheistic? Are you, I see you have a cross and a rose, it looks like, on as your lapel. Tell me a little bit about what the belief system is. Do atheists get to be along to this?
At its beginnings, as like a neophyte starting out, you have to believe in a god.
A god.
But you can believe in polytheistic beliefs as well.
So
within the beginning, but it's kind of a weeding out process because, like I mentioned, the inner order of the Golden Dawn is strictly Rosicrucian, believing in a monotheistic, the Christian God. So throughout the various degrees, it sprinkles in a little bit more Christian symbolism. So those that are opposed to that will naturally drop out.
I'm not saying this in an offense at all. So what you're saying is the outer order has definitely a polytheistic style to it, or people sometimes come in.
It's more of a style because you're not worshiping these gods. They're archetypes. They're archetypes for various energies. So they're not being worshipped at all.
So bring up the definition of an archetype.
An archetype, which is a term that was coined by Carl Jung to represent a figure that represents certain ideals, certain energies.
A live symbol?
They could be alive, like.
So they have like an energy to them.
They do have an energy they could tap into.
Yeah, much like if some people might be aware of an egregore. That's another esoteric thought.
Yep.
It's like a living battery. It's like going to like Notre Dame and feeling or being in a stadium with all these people. Shout out to Pierce Vaughn. I'm utilizing his book Renaissance of Man and Mason as the concept. But you ever been to like a place, a sacred place, and felt that connectedness?
Oh, definitely. And I'm glad you brought up the term egregor because that is actually used within the Golden Dawn framework. And it's also, it kind of is connected to those archetypes. Like each Egyptian god brings its energy to that temple. So you build up that egregor using those energies.
But as you go into the inner order, it has more of a monotheistic approach, or at least kind of Christian. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you are correct. The egregor of the inner order is strictly Rosicrucian, which is you could see Rosicrucianism as one that follows Christ.
Okay. Wow, that's pretty fascinating. And I appreciate your attention to detail. So some people are, if they believe in multiple gods, would they just stay into the outer order? Is that how it works?
Naturally, they're supposed to be balancing out these elements within themselves that will open them up to these different concepts with further degrees, as well as being introduced to more Christian symbolism. if they're really opposed to that, then they would not want to go beyond that, really, where it's mostly or strictly that Christian symbolism.
All right. And then you're going through these different grades. Have you been through all the grades?
Correct.
You have? Okay. And from the research that I've looked up into the Golden Dawn, there's some other meditative aspects besides meditation and stillness, and that would be the tarot or tarot cards.
Yep.
So do you want to talk about, is that something that your temple was utilizing?
As far as I'm concerned, all the temples involved with the order I was part of utilized the system of the tarot. It's one of the working tools of the Golden Dawn. Just for example, like I mentioned, the Tree of Life is the main structure used with the Golden Dawn. The 22 paths correlate with the 22 arcana of the tarot system.
Now, we're going to have to break this down again. The tarot has the major arcana or major secrets, and then the minor arcana or the minor secrets. And you brought up at the beginning of this podcast the hero's journey, because that's where I heard it from. Because
Yes.
I am a practicer of tarot. But I think it's fascinating that it's interweaving into this part of the discussion. So they use it to fortune tell. They're using this for clairvoyancy. They're looking this for answers. What is it? Is it all, or is it something else?
I wouldn't say divination at all.
Okay.
Most, if not all, the practices that I've dealt with the tarot card within this system was never used for divination purposes. The main purpose of using the tarot on the 22 paths of the Tree of Life is called pathworking. It helps that alchemical journey, that hero's journey. So you start out with a certain card that correlates with the path that you're on within that grade, and you actually mentally or psychically go into that card, and then you do a journey specifically into that card.
Are they teaching you classes of how to use this, or does this all have to be self-taught?
No, there's knowledge lectures about that, as well as various classes that are offered to the student.
How many people are in a temple? Is there a limit?
No, there's no limit. There's an officer structure like in Masonry, and then you have your regular members that sit on the outside of the temple watching it.
You mentioned, and we're going to get into this a little bit more later, you mentioned that you've had a passion, and I believe that Golden Dawn assisted in this during your Golden Dawn journey into alchemy.
Correct.
So what is alchemy to you?
Alchemy is transmutation, raising vibrations, turning your mundane self into your more spiritualized version of yourself.
Spiritual alchemy.
Spiritual alchemy as well as operative alchemy. I learned how to use lab equipment and incorporate the various processes of operative alchemy, which also led me to my spiritual journey as well.
Why is that such a primary focus in Golden Dawn?
Well, I think it's a main focus with most traditions, even Masonry. From my perspective, all of it's alchemy. All of it's about raising yourself to your more spiritual self. That is the point of it all. That's the point of the spiritual journey or the hero's journey. Like within the hero's journey, you're born, you get initiated, you face your challenges in life, and you come out the other end conquering yourself.
Would that be stripping yourself from material things and getting yourself aligned in more of a divine essence, much like the Kabbalistic Tree of Life?
Correct.
Okay. Hopefully I said that right. Tell me if I said
Oh,
something
you said
wrong.
it perfectly.
I'm not as much of a student. I pick up things quick, but I just think it's so fascinating because you're probably the only no, actually I know two other people who are a part of the Golden Dawn who are also Masonic authors as well. And they rave about the Golden Dawn and what it offers and how it's impacted their life. Actually, this is a great question because a good friend of mine, shout out to Jamie Paul Lamb. He's the author of Myth, Magic, and Masonry and the Middle Chamber and the Archetype. here's another book too. I can't think of as well, and it's all based on his papers. The Archetype Temple. I might have that wrong. Mike, you can add at the bottom what the name of that book is. I'll provide it for you. The one thing I've seen in different articles, and I've talked to Jamie about, is guardian angels.
Oh,
And also from those studies that the temple is kind of set up like the Garden of Eden in a way. And you're also incorporating through your spiritual prayer work and all the other exercises that you are learning in the Golden Dawn, that you actually are connecting to your guardian angel, which is fascinating. Again, because you're seeing a polytheistic, and then this inner order's monotheistic.
yep.
There's a lot going on.
Well, and you're correct by mentioning the guardian angel, because one of the primary goals of the aspirant of the Golden Dawn is to obtain communication with your holy guardian angel, which resides at the top of the tree of life, which is called Keter, or the Godhead.
I'm really trying to frame how I want to lead into that. I love this. Why?
Well, that holy guardian angel is connected to that prima materia that I spoke of, your true self.
Well,
That's kind of like that inner self that you can hear, that inner voice.
I would call that the conscious.
Yes, that consciousness. And a lot of scientists are saying too nowadays that consciousness lives beyond death. And throughout your life, you could feel that. So part of that journey is that's almost an anchor to your true self. And you're reaching up to that holy guardian angel on that tree of life to communicate with.
From my studies, I've read about a lot of different figures, as have you. You've said a few already. There's one I want to actually go back in time and talk, and this man was named John Dee.
Ooh.
John Dee, and I believe it was Edward Kelly.
Yes.
Who, John Dee was like an advisor to which queen?
Queen Elizabeth I.
Okay. And his goal was to help her do what?
He was her spiritual advisor, so he would actually do like divinations for
scrying, which is
kind of like spirit vision.
Yeah, by utilizing a candle and a mirror, correct? You stare at it in a way.
He used a black mirror.
He has a black mirror. It's actually in one of the UK museums as well. And
I think he might have used a crystal ball as well at times.
Probably. That's probably where we also get,
right. That's exactly where it comes from.
Yeah, the pop culture of that. And I'm tying this into the Golden Dawn because this will relate. He advised, some people say he would actually use these techniques and rituals to spy on whatever the England's enemy was at the time. I think it might have been Prussia, but don't hold me to it. Prussians, do not write your emails. And he was just pretty much gathering information. He actually had his own laboratory for alchemical works, and Edward Kelly was his assistant. Now, Edward Kelly got in trouble because apparently he was marked as a charlatan, and what they did was they cut off his earlobes because he became a fraud in what he was working with before he met John Dee. But John Dee saw something in him and utilized Edward Kelly and his
Edward
ability.
Was kind of the vehicle, so to speak, for these communication with they called it Enochian angels.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to get into, because they called it that Enochian, or the language of the angels, and they were trying to connect with their guardian angel or just angelic beings, correct? Back in this, would it be medieval time, or would it be just
a Renaissance time?
Renaissance time, okay.
They were trying to just communicate with these angels that appeared out of nowhere into this crystal ball or black mirror that they were using, and they had this really crazy ongoing conversation with these various angels. Some of them kind of came in and had like a destructive side to themselves.
Well, wouldn't that be demonic? I mean, listen, we hear from organizations that you need to stay away. And by the way, here's my little disclaimer. Masonry does not promote this. This is other esoteric orders and history of esoteric thought. And what I was going to say with that was they're really trying to channel something greater than them for advice. But wouldn't that also could be a beacon for demonic entities and other things that could be harmful?
Yeah, I personally think that they were communicating with a variety of things. I think those destructive, what they still called the angels, coming in, might have been demons. I mean, they were causing physical destruction to their temple or their working space.
Would you say could be a problem in the Golden Dawn?
It could lead to that because the Golden Dawn does utilize, and it's the only ceremonial magical system out there that uses the Enochian system.
Which John Dee
came up with.
Yeah. When I was reading that story and he was having a lot of success, he talked about something called the red powder. It's an alchemical experiment, I believe he said. Do you know anything about the red powder? I know P.D. Newman, I believe, talks about it in his one of his latest books.
Well, there's speculation that the red powder was just phosphorus.
Go on.
And from my research, it wasn't anything deeper. Like it didn't really associate with the philosopher's stone that much.
Okay. Was this a substance they took and they could channel these entities for communication?
Potentially. I mean,
well, you look at
who's
Greece.
To say what it was? It could have been maybe some kind of hallucinogenic powder.
Right. I mean, let's go back into Greece, right? There was the Oracle of Delphi, and that's like connected to a mountain that had I want to say sulfuric and other smoke coming out, and she would go into these trance-like states and prophesize what was going on. Now,
so that could have been the red powder there too.
In a way.
Yeah.
I mean, it might just be a symbolical red because I know red has
red is alchemy itself, but
yeah. Oh, some books fell.
And we did not do any Enochian chants.
No, we did not. Put the disclaimer out, Michael. This is fascinating stuff. And you're not even in Masonry yet, and you're learning all about this stuff. But again, working that practice and not having proper studies and trainings into it can lead you to a road of destruction. I mean, you can look up Edward Kelly and John Dee's ending of what happened to them. I'll leave you on a cliffhanger for some homework, but Edward Kelly was in this so much that he was seeing visions, seeing angels, seeing fire, people burning, all this stuff that was just warping his mind. And I've often wondered, in a meditative state, when you are vibrating into a whole nother plane of consciousness, you know, I can see something that you can't see because I'm in tuned with this into a higher frequency than what you are, for lack of a better word.
Well, it's almost you're expanding your consciousness through these practices, so you can see things beyond the spectrum of someone that has a more limited consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, you see that you hear about that on different podcasts, like Joe Rogan, shout out, with mushrooms and ayahuasca and all these different DMT trips.
Oh yeah.
Right? And that can really wreck people at times.
But that stuff can also have a positive element to it. A lot of the ancient initiatory schools stemming back from Egypt can at times use hallucinatory elements in their initiation practices.
Going back to the Golden Dawn now, is there a hallucinatory substance that you guys are utilizing in your degree work? Or are you guys stone sober?
No, we're stone sober. But, and I'll say this, you can obtain a point in your spiritual self where you can have an experience during certain rituals that are comparable to, let's say, a mushroom trip, so to speak, by being completely sober and just and
Self-induced?
yes.
Really? I've heard that recently. I was talking to a friend who does breathe work exercises, and you can actually do certain breathing exercises that can induce those kind of hallucinogenic trips.
The Golden Dawn did have something similar to that. It was called Ruach breathing. Ruach is kind of like a Vedic term for energy. And you do these really hardcore breathing techniques to like almost to the point of passing out. And it's really vigorous and you're raising up this energy through your breath work and you could start having various visions, weird experiences.
How long were you in the Golden Dawn?
I was in the Golden Dawn probably going on like 16 to 17 years since I got my neophyte initiation.
And you had these presumptive thoughts on Freemasonry. Where did the transition of leaving the Golden Dawn behind and moving to leaving the Golden Dawn behind and moving to Freemasonry?
Well, just to restate what I previously said, at that when I was in the middle of and being in the Order of the Golden Dawn, I had a negative view on Freemasonry until I met my friend who was from Haiti, who was a Freemason. We were both part of a local temple that eventually started in Fort Wayne, Indiana. That temple started to dissolve, and I was losing my sense of purpose and initiative of wanting to continue with that specific group. So I consulted with my friend, and he's like, really, the only natural step for you to take is to join Freemasonry.
Yeah, which is interesting because, again, we don't solicitate memberships, but he's from Haiti,
Right.
and he's telling you maybe this should be your next logical step. So you did.
I did.
And how did that journey go? How did the transition go into that steps into Freemasonry?
It was pretty smooth. I mean, it had more of like a social aspect that I did enjoy. When I first was initiated in Freemasonry, which was in 2019, is when I was raised a Master Mason. Um, and I'll say I was raised at a lodge, Soldi Bayless, downtown Fort Wayne, Indiana, same lodge that Dave Thomas from Wendy's was initiated in, and there it was just a group of guys that would like to socialize, and nothing really beyond that.
Were you impressed or shocked with some of the degrees in Freemasonry and some of the alchemical? Did you see any alchemical symbolism as you're going through this journey, already being an expert into the Golden Dawn and their order?
Oh yeah, just there was processes of death and resurrection within the degree work of Freemasonry that coincided with certain process of death and resurrection within the Golden Dawn framework. And then there were certain esoteric elements that you see within your Master Mason degree that I won't mention right now, but those I have seen specifically within my alchemical teachings. Just so you're aware, I was also part of a alchemical organization called the Herodom Group when I was in the Golden Dawn.
And what is that group? Are you still part of that, or did you have to relinquish that when you left Golden Dawn?
I didn't have to relinquish it. I kind of just took a step toward my own personal alchemical journey where I took kind of a step away of the organizational side of things and I delved into it at a more personal level. So I'm currently not officially associated with the Herodom Group. I do have certain connections within it.
All right. I know you're an author and you go and give lectures on what you studied. You're walking in here Not everybody in Masonry walks in with the kind of experience that you had. What are people's initial thoughts?
Well, after joining the fraternity of
Just
Freemasonry,
in general, yes.
in general, a lot of people that have no idea what it's about see it in a negative light. I've been accused of being a Satanist before. I've been accused of being part of the Illuminati before. I guess one reason that I'm being a little bit more outspoken about my journey these days is to shed light on what this truly is, what esoteric philosophy entails in the eyes of the public, so they could have a better understanding.
Are there men in the fraternity today that you correspond with, other than your friend from Hades, that has been a big impact and influence in your life?
Oh, for sure. Shortly after I was raised a Master Mason, I posted on the Indiana Freemasonic Facebook group about the Golden Dawn because I know the associations of Freemasonry and the Golden Dawn. Um, I received a comment on that post by a great brother of both of us, Michael Doxey.
Love Michael.
Yeah, and he's been kind of a mentor at times and just a all-out great friend and brother.
Met Michael at a joint Scottish Rite reunion with the Valley of Toledo and Valley of Fort Wayne. He is a world traveler. He's a dear friend. He was actually going to be here today, but he came down. Hope you're feeling better, Mike. Looking forward to getting you and your story on All Square very soon. So you've been in it for about 7 years now into the fraternity. Where are you finding your enjoyment?
Well, my enjoyment is meeting like-minded brothers like yourself.
Thanks.
Digger, and it gives me the opportunity to dig deeper in myself. I'm having a better understanding of who I am just by conversing with fellows like yourself.
Well, we're very grateful to have you on the podcast with us today and just sharing your story. Listen, you actually brought this suitcase of your cabinet of curiosity from your own lab at home. You wanted to show some things. Mike's actually going to work on the camera to get it set up here. So you can do a little show and tell about alchemy.
Sounds great. And since you're so curious,
Yeah.
I'm not only a traveling Freemason, as you can see with my suitcase here, I'm a traveling alchemist as well.
Excellent. Well, I'm looking forward to that, and we'll let Mike get the camera work all ready. And as he is working on that right now, so you're in Masonry. What does your wife think of this organization in your family?
Oh, she thinks it's great. We've had some situations. She thinks it's great. We've had some rough patches, like where things came up with our house, like our plumbing went out completely, and the lodge that I'm part of stepped in and gave us a little financial donation that really put us back on solid ground. And
That brotherly love and fellowship goes a long way. It's not that in Masonry you don't expect those kind of things, but here we are, right?
she's also connected to the fraternity somewhat herself.
How so?
Well, I'm a local Shriner up in Fort Wayne.
Can you pull the mic just a little closer?
I'm a local Shriner in Fort Wayne, the Mizpah Shrine. And after being a Shriner for a couple of years, she actually joined the women's version of that called the Daughters of the Nile. And they have their own little dance group, and she's the director of their dance group.
That's great that you guys are able to be embracing that over there at the shrine. We have a female shrine organization called Dendera that is a part of our local shrine, which I just attended the installation for. Congratulations to Adam Latham. He is now moved up into another position into the shrine. But look, you set all this up. I feel like I'm back in chemistry class. I can't wait for you to start discussing all of this. But hey, if we could, I don't think everybody should be practicing this. Maybe you want to throw a disclaimer out. for this?
Yeah, I'm going to discuss the process of distillation, which is a major part of alchemy. I will put a disclaimer out there that you should not try this at home because with certain amounts of alcohol that's obtained, you do need a permit, as well as you're dealing with a lot of fumes, a lot of heat. It can be a very dangerous task if you do not know what you're doing.
Okay, where do we begin on this?
Well, I'll start out by saying, like Freemasonry, you're given working tools, and Freemasonry giving working tools that help chip away at the rough ashlar to help with becoming the perfect ashlar or the perfected self. And likewise, in alchemy, you have working tools that help perfect that material that you're working with and transmuted it into a more spiritual version of it. I utilize the plant kingdom with a process called spagyrics, which is a term created by the Swiss alchemist Paracelsus. So one of the first stages of alchemy, you want to separate a plant into its three elements of mercury, sulfur, and salt. So one of the first steps is to utilize a distillation train, which I have here, which consists of a boiling flask, a condensing tube, and a collecting flask. And to start with, you'll obtain fresh herbs from your garden or roots and barks and whatnot. I love to use a Vedic root called ashwagandha. I like to call the ashwagandha the 409 of the plant kingdom because it has a lot of attributes that are beneficial to yourself. So you'll obtain that plant matter, fill up your boiling flask halfway with the plant material, and then fill it up the rest of the way with red or white wine. I prefer to use white wine.
Now, when you say white wine, is it sweet, dry? Just curious.
It does not matter because your primary goal is to extract the alcohol from that wine, and you'll leave behind its sulfates and water. So it does not matter what kind of wine.
Okay.
I would like to also mention that ancient alchemists considered the grape the most spiritual fruit of the plant kingdom, and that all other fruits aspire to be the grape. And it's due to this process. So you have your mixture of the plant and the wine. You'll heat up a heat element. Typically, there'll be a heat element here. It could be a sand bath, a water bath, or I've come up with if you have a small pot filled with copper beads that form perfectly around the boiling flask, the copper beads maintain a steady temperature without fluctuating. You'll heat up the boiling flask to 83 degrees Celsius, which I like to use the keyword Celsius instead of Fahrenheit because Celsius was a term created by the Swiss alchemist Paracelsus. Once this flask is heated up to that point, the wine will start creating a vapor that'll rise up the boiling flask, go through the condensing tube, and solidify as a liquid. And that liquid will be ethanol alcohol. What's left in your boiling flask is the dead plant matter, as well as the leftover water and the sulfur of the wine, which is its personality. The ethanol alcohol is considered alchemical mercury. It's and with the Greek god Mercury, the Mercury being the messenger god, that vapor also includes the various attributes of that plant. So once you have the separate alcohol and menstruum, this is also considered a menstruum left in the boiling flask, you'll put the menstruum in a cabinet, a dark, cool cabinet, for 40 days, which is considered the alchemical month.
Why 40 days, though? I'm curious.
It has to do with the lunar cycles. The ancient alchemists used a lunar calendar.
So do you have to start on a certain phase of the moon and follow along there, or
you don't necessarily have to? I've noticed that it doesn't make a huge impact, but the ancient alchemists recommend starting on a new moon and finish on the full moon, because as soon as the new moon finishes and that moon starts to appear more and more, that magnetic pull of the moon will start pulling the essence from this menstruum out in the alcohol.
Now, you said something to me before we started recording about metals, removing metals.
Yes, that's another technique that the ancient alchemists recommended, that you should divest yourself of all metals before obtaining the plant matter in which you want to use. The ancient alchemists believed that the metals, certain metals, if you use like more like lead and things of that, like a lower form of metal, that can contaminate the plant matter.
And I see we have some salt here.
We have the salt here. We're using Himalayan salt lamp here as just a representation of salt. Salt is the vehicle, which I'll get to in a moment.
Okay.
It's the body of the plant.
And did you mention something about sulfur earlier?
Yes, sulfur is within this menstruum. It's what's left behind after the alcohol is extracted. The sulfur is the personality of the plant, which contains its color, its scent, as well as its medicinal properties.
And that residue, as I'll call it, is put away for 40 days in a dark place.
Correct.
Or is that the new elixir, I guess I would say?
It's not the elixir until it's all combined. So you keep them separated. So you'll put this mercury or ethanol alcohol, set that aside as well. Have that wait for 40 days. Once the 40-day month is over, you'll take your menstruum, and then you'll take a cheesecloth, and you'll strain the menstruum into an open vessel or a clear vessel, like a mason jar. And then what you'll be left over is that fluid, which is the sulfur, and the dead plant matter still left in the flask. You'll take the dead plant matter and put that into a cauldron, place it in a furnace, and you'll burn it until you obtain pure white salts, which is the body of that plant. You need the body of the plant to bond the other two elements together. So once you obtain that salt, obtain another vessel, and you'll combine the salt, the mercury, and the sulfur, solve et coagula, so to speak. Combine or separate and recombine.
And when this is all done, are there any more steps, or is this just...
Well, you'll put that mixture, which is called a spagyric. You'll put that in a dropper bottle, and then you'll put a full drop under your tongue, and that will be a very potent medicine.
My mind's going every which way to get this. What is the beneficial use of this elixir once everything's together? Because you take the old with the new and combine it. So what are the benefits of your years in alchemy with this project work?
Well, it enhances the properties of that medicine. Compared to most health food shops, you'll get a tincture, which looks similar, but it's missing the body or the salt of the plant. So it's not reached its full potential yet. So you'll have the medicinal benefits of that plant, but you'll have its full potential of that plant. But also, if you want to utilize it for ceremonial use, each plant has a attribute that's associated with different planets, which are also associated with days of the week. So if you make a spagyric of each day of the week and you want to do a ceremony also that is associated with that certain planetary element, if you take that tincture or spagyric, you'll be more connected to that element, and your work within that will be more elevated.
And you learned this in the Golden Dawn?
Correct.
By a mentor?
I had a specific mentor that was in the Golden Dawn who was a high adept that was also associated with the Herodom group.
Wow. This is quite fascinating. This is definitely new for All Square. I really appreciate you doing that. So there would be a flame under there, and yeah, you're using a lot of the elements that is it called the you said what was that Latin phrase you said?
Solve et coagula, which is separate and recombine.
What's interesting is one of our other All Square alums, Kevin Fuller, actually performs alchemy as well, and actually gave me a remedy for when I was sick. I used it. I did feel better actually, but he utilizes meads
Okay.
as well, and it was another fascinating approach. So, how long have you been performing this kind of lab work?
I'd say, oh, probably about 12 years since I actually began this specific journey with alchemy.
And there's many different remedies. Is these things that you came up with yourself, or is there like a I don't know a cookbook?
Well, there's a
That's the best way I
there's
can say it.
various handbooks on alchemy. Paracelsus has a great one just called Spagyric. Gives a great usage on this as well as some recommendations on plants. I utilize a book called Culpeper's Handbook for Plants, and it actually gives various plants their attributes as well as their planetary associations.
Using the lunar? Are you using any the solar with this? Does any of this ever go out in the sun?
Lunar you're using because of the magnetic pole. That's why this boiling flask contains the menstruum, which is the sulfur and the plant matter mixed. That's a menstruum because it's connected to the moon and the moon's pull on that process. And it's just like with the tides of the planet is connected to the pull of the moon, the gestation period in women. And it's interesting because, and I'm going to go back to the Kabbalah or the Tree of Life, the ninth Siphirat on the Tree of Life, before you reach Malkut, which is the 10th one, which is this physical plane or earth, is Luna, the moon. So from the earth comes the moon, which is the ninth Siphirat. And it takes 9 months of gestation to create a human being.
This is something I want to add. When you saying Kabbalah, I know there's many different spellings and interpretations. Each spelling and interpretation is different. You got Kabbalah with a K, you have a Kabbalah with a Q, which is definitely more esoteric. You got Kabbalah with spelled with a C. They all have little different spellings. Which kind of Kabbalah are you talking about?
This here I would associate with Kabbalah with a Q, which is considered the hermetic Kabbalah. Kabbalah with the K is the traditional Hebrew Kabbalah. Kabbalah with the C is Christian Kabbalah.
And throughout your journeys into other parts of Masonry, you've probably have seen alchemical symbols that you recognize from your other journey into those other orders, correct?
There's a lot of alchemical symbolism within Masonry.
Yeah.
And there is also there's certain symbols in Masonry that allude, if you know the concept of esoteric, where you're digging into the hidden meanings behind things, you'll see that certain symbols of Masonry allude to processes of alchemy. Our penalties of obligation actually coincide with process of spagyric alchemy.
Wow. What else would you like to tell the audience before we go back to the regular camera setup? Is there anything else?
Well, I would just say you can utilize this alchemical operation from operative standpoint, where you're using physical lab ware and physical materials like the plant material and all the equipment, and utilize those processes and turn it within yourself. The distillation train can represent distillation of internal things like negative parts of yourself, and distilling all of the negative attributes to create the more spiritual self. Eliminating the vices and superfluities.
Well said, man. I really appreciate you showcasing this and also putting out there like this isn't something that everybody should be focusing on. This is professionals, and they
Well,
probably could.
it's a spiritual science as well, because I do lab reports on my practices to show that these experiments are successful or not.
Right. Have you ever had an experience that actually went bad?
Just I didn't get some of the portions correct, and maybe some of the final product was a little bit more watered down, or maybe it had a little bit too much alcohol.
Okay. Yeah, that's can definitely happen. So again, professionals deal with this, ladies
And
and
I've
gentlemen.
also had some of my crucibles completely crack because of too much heat.
Wow. Here's a great question for you. You went from a co-ed order with the Golden Dawn to now an all-male order. Do you find the benefits in both? Do you find the benefits in Masonry? Tell me what your thoughts are on that, because I think you'd be the first one of our first guests to definitely have a foot in both of those camps.
Yeah, there's benefits to both, as well as there's somewhat of a downside too to having a co-ed organization. And there's sexual drama that can happen.
Of course.
Actually, the Imperator, his name was, for those who are familiar with certain Golden Dawn group, uh, the adepts actually ended up booting him out because he was getting involved with some of the female adepts.
Which happened also in Mathers's London temple as well, with a certain occult learner, scholar named Aleister Crowley. I know he was messing around with that, and that actually, between that and some internal drama that was going on with that temple, actually led to the downfall, where other more scholarly esoteric Masons, like I believe Arthur Edward Waite and Yates and Bram Stoker and Arthur Conan Doyle and many other people of occult studies
Yeah.
were a part of too.
Well, I wonder if that's what led Waite to start his own kind of a Golden Dawn associated group, the Fellowship of the Rosy Cross, which is it's a strictly Rosicrucian or Christian mystic version of the Golden Dawn.
Could be. Can you give a quick blurb of who Arthur Edward Waite is?
He joined the Golden Dawn about 3 years after the start of the temple. Most out there would know him as the co-creator of the Rider-Waite tarot deck. He was very involved with hermetic philosophy, alchemy, Christian mysticism. He had more of a Christian mindset than most in the Golden Dawn. He was actually a Martinist that most even members of the Golden Dawn were not aware of. He kept that really close to the heart.
What is Martinist? Into just a quick summary of what that is. That's another esoteric non-Masonic organization as well.
Yeah, Martinism is kind of like a French-inspired Christian mystical group.
Yeah, it definitely has Western mysticism involved in it,
Right.
and there's a divine.
Which is interesting, because once Martinism left France, it went to Haiti. One of my goals is to eventually go to Haiti. If there's any hidden Martinist groups down there.
Well, you are definitely a traveler, my brother. Listen, you actually gave me and Mike a gift. I want you to discuss this. Tell us a little bit about the book you wrote.
Well, throughout my journey with alchemy, I wanted to kind of write my magnum opus, which I eventually did a few years ago. It's called Seeking the Gold Within: An Alchemical Explanation of Self. You could find that thebookpatch.com. You can look up the title or my first and last name. as well as if you're a student at the Carl Jung Institute in Zurich, Switzerland, you can find this book in the library there.
That's incredible. Now, thank you, Mike. Actually, can you put it back on the screen for us? I see some of the 4 elements as well, and I also see what looks to be the sun being engulfed by a lion. Can you tell us why you picked that alchemical symbolism?
Yeah, it's a great depiction of the great work. The whole entire process in alchemy is considered the great work. And this is kind of the completion of the great work here, where you have the lion eating the sun. The lion is a reference to when you conquer the dragon within, you become the lion. And the lion eats the sun, which is a representation of gold or the philosopher's stone, and the work is complete. As Jesus said upon the cross, it is finished.
That is incredible. Can't wait. I know Mike can't wait to be looking at this book. Check it out. Where again?
Bookpatch.com. Look up Rodney McGillvary. The title of the book, Seeking the Gold Within, an Alchemical Explanation of Self, or at the Carl Jung Institute Library in Zurich, Switzerland.
Incredible. Brotherhood is such a key focus in Masonry. And have you found that footing of brotherhood throughout your journey and experiences?
Oh, more so now than ever.
It's fascinating that men from all walks of life come together from this fraternity. It's really why we started this podcast. One of the 3 main principles of why we started. So, I mean, you're really just in that infancy of your Masonic journey. You bring so much knowledge. And again, this probably would have been an example of where, if it wasn't for our fraternity, you and I might have never met. So
that's true. And what a blessing it is to have met you.
I really appreciate it. I appreciate the travels. Listen, this is going to be a mega episode. So much information. People can reach out to you for questions, can't they?
Oh, definitely. And I encourage it.
Good. Also, congratulations. Not only are you an author, not only are you traveling, not only are you a traveling alchemist with all this experience, congratulations. You started, along with your partner, co-host and partner, Jeff Bennett, a new podcast. Tell us a little bit about that podcast and what it's about.
Oh, yes. I started this new podcast called Pen and Compass with a great brother and companion of mine, Jeff Bennett. Very knowledgeable guy. We wanted to have a podcast kind of focused on Masonic authors, other podcast creators, and just Masonic creatives altogether. We got about 5 or 6 episodes right now. You can find us on YouTube or Facebook under Pen and Compass Podcast.
It's exciting stuff. I've already watched episode 1 last night. Looking forward to getting into the others. They're a rising star in the podcast community. Brother, and Jeff's from Texas, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, so we're getting brothers together from all across, all squares. So happy to have you on here. We can't wait to get Jeff from Texas inside the Symbolic Lodge of Conversation. You also had, because we're coming up over on our time, you also wanted to provide a plug for an upcoming event that you're going to be a part of. Mike, can we put that on the screen for the people?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. We have the San Antonio Esoteric Summit coming up this year, June 7th in San Antonio, Texas, at the Shrine there. Our speakers are Jeff Bennett, Ben Williams, Frank Zepp, Dirk Hughes, Robert Johnson, myself, Rodney McGillvary, and TJ Brumsfield. Jeff Bennett is going to speak on symbolism. RJ Johnson is going to speak on Esoteric 101. I'm going to be speaking on alchemy. TJ Brumsfield will be speaking on the Kabbalah. Dirk Hughes will be speaking on beehives. Ben Williams will be speaking on Martinism. And Frank Zepp will be our master of ceremonies.
This is exciting. What an exciting time, in a time in history where we can be open and talk about these thoughts and ideas and subjects of the esoteric arts. Those are some quality people for those who are familiar in the podcast community and in some of the other endeavors that those brethren are a part of. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about that experience. Now, is that open to the public, or is that for members of the Masonic fraternity?
It's for Master Masons only, and there's a limited number of tickets available for 50 members or 50 ticket holders.
Oh, 50 quality guys all in the same room sharing discussions. San Antonio, June 7th?
June 7th, yes.
June 7th. And there's a link that will be able to purchase tickets, correct?
Correct. If you go on our Facebook page, just facebook.com/Pin and Compass podcast, there's a link there to purchase tickets.
Cool stuff. I'm looking forward to continue hearing more on your journey and where your podcast is going. My last question for you, my brother. All your traveling, there's a lot of other seekers of knowledge and learning more what our beautiful fraternity has to offer. There's guys out there like you where they were first starting their journey, where I was starting my journey into Freemasonry. And what would you tell them? What would be the advice you would tell them if they asked you what direction they need to go?
I would advise those that are interested to look within yourself. Find what area of Freemasonry interests you. And then I would seek out your local lodge, get to know the members therein, and have them get to know you as well to see what lodge benefits you. There are various types of lodges around the country. And once you figure out what suits you best, contact your local Grand Lodge, and then they will direct you to that specific type of lodge.
That, my brother, Rodney McGillvary. I'm R.L. Franks, and you are all square. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, R.L. Franks here. Thanks again for watching today's episode. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, if you believe someone can benefit from the message that we provided on today's podcast, send it over to them. You may inspire them.